The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
Joining us today, we're talking Hope and Despair, and we're talking with the author, Alan Wilde. Thank you for taking the time today, Al.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm excited.
Calm down. Says, stay in control, okay? After we get off air, we get wild, okay?
Oh, man.
Oh, I'm the wild one. You got the wrong guy interviewing. Now, so you wrote this book. So okay, let's start with who Alan Wilde is and how you got into writing.
Well, Alan Wilde is actually a pen name for myself, and I really started writing a while ago when I started blogging, and it was just the natural progression, and I decided to put my life experience in a book and call it fiction.
Oh, so are you taking real things that happened to you in your life and kind of putting it into this fiction book?
Absolutely. Rising some of the history from when I was younger, a lot of the things that happened to me really just made me the person who I am. So I figured sharing that would be a good motivation for healing, I guess. And long story short, it worked. And so I just published the book, and it's turned out well, I think.
So that's interesting. So how did you know, like, what particular things did you want to talk about in your book? Without being too detailed, but what was it about your life that you thought you should share?
Well, the two main characters, they share different qualities. So it's not like there's one specific situation that's happened. I mean, there's several situations that have happened, but it's all mixed up and muddled, but that's life. So I think with the book, one of the things that is a main player for one of the characters, Noah, as a child, he was burnt by boiling coffee, and that also happened with me. It was a horrible situation, and it was at the hands of an abusive, evil person, and that also happened.
And Alan, I was so you touched on this, but the question I was going to ask was, is it mostly the relationships that you're exploring in here? Because when I read your book, I did notice there are some abusive and deeply traumatic relationships kind of haunting your protagonist. I mean, is that kind of what you're interested in exploring?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you feel like and you said you do feel like that was like a healing experience for you?
It was, because putting it down in writing, it was really just a step forward, and it allowed me to reassess and really take a step back and just decide that, this is not something that I had control over. It's not something that I really could control. And as an adult, we all want to think that we have control of our entire lives, and that's just not the case. And that was the situation with my characters. Mm-hmm. They really had no control. I had no control as a child.
Did you make changes to some of the? Because I would say, like, I think when people do this, one of the things that people frequently do is empower themselves or the characters in a way that they weren't empowered. So did you make those kinds of changes?
I did. A lot of times with Noah, he really drew in and shut the world off. And that's a situation that it would have been a natural progression for that character to become reclusive and be a person who really didn't reach out to the world. But that's not me. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly how I made him, because if it were to happen to someone else, I would imagine that's exactly what they would do. They would just shut the world off. But with me, it's more lackadaisical. I'm not necessarily the outgoing person, but I'm also not reclusive. Mm-hmm. So I'm just somewhere in the middle.
I'm wondering, it sounds like it's pretty personal. Why would you go into a fiction writing rather than just doing a true story, like a nonfiction, with your story?
I wanted to take the liability out of the situation. I can't really say who I didn't change the name of, but there is a person in the book who I did not change the name of, and it was kind of a jab. I really wanted him to feel the pain, even though he probably isn't even with us anymore. But I just didn't change the name, and I wanted to leave it as a fiction story because not all aspects are completely true. So, I mean, the personalities all are different. So Oliver, one of the other main characters, he has some personality traits that I have and personality traits that my husband has. So it's really gray area. That's why I needed to leave it as a fiction story.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. I just wonder. I'm trying to learn how to write fiction now that I've been on true crime, and this last story's got me so pumped up that I'm over true crime. So I'm trying to get some feedback here on how you do this.
And Alan, what in terms of the mystery itself, the crime, was that also taken from personal experience? No,
that was completely fictitious.
Okay.
So the murders did not happen. From what I understand, the villain in the story, he was actually wanted for murder, but as for any other murders after that, I was not aware of that. That was completely something that I made up, and it just worked out in the book.
Wow.
Well, why did you include murders? Like, why did you make it a murder mystery? And not so much on detail, but what drew you into that, writing that? Why wasn't it just a drama or something like that? Like, what inspired you to go that direction?
I didn't really have it planned to start with. I just started writing, and when I was thinking what would happen if, and then the plan started coming out onto paper, and it was really interesting how you take a look at some people who are really strung out on drugs. They're looking to make easy cash, and that's one of the situations in the book where they really just they're taking everything that they can, and they're wanting to really step over the villain in the book, and they want to take everything they can and just sell it and buy more drugs. But it didn't end up that way. They ended up being murdered.
Wow. So let's get to you. As in, what are your inspirations as a writer?
I have a very active and vivid imagination, and it just gets me carried away. So putting it down on writing really gets control of my thoughts. And I could be walking down the street and I could see somebody standing there, and I already have another book just by looking at a person standing there. It's interesting. I can draw inspiration from a picture. I can talk to a person, and just a little bit of information from them is enough to create a character and a storyline.
Wow. So I got to stay away from being in a coffee shop with you. They tell all sorts of stories about me. Oh my God, that'd be terrible. Well, that's cool. But so, are you going to go into other types of writing as well? Are you going to stick with crime fiction? Or are you going to go into sci-fi, fantasy, or even ecstasy?
I don't have any set plans. Well, other than I've got Hope and Despair, and then I'm working on finishing up my second book, which is actually 1.5 in the series. But as for any other genres, I'm completely open. I definitely will follow wherever my imagination takes me, but I'm not going to just keep myself in the murder mystery genre and just stick with it.
Well, and you answered part of my question, but I'm curious, so like how many books are you seeing for this investigation series? And then since, am I right, this is your first book, is that right?
It is, yes.
What would you say, like, for someone like Al who's thinking about making the jump to a fiction book, like what would you say you took away from writing this first one? Like what were some things you learned from it?
The technical standpoint, I definitely would follow, and I'm sure you know this because you already have published books, but make sure everything is set up first, and that goes for anybody who is publishing their first book. Definitely make sure whatever word processor you're using is completely set up, and pay attention to your writing. Don't just write. Make sure grammar is correct, and then that will save you so much time later on down the road. And for me, it was a learning experience because my creativity came out faster than I could type. So in the beginning, I just typed. There were no paragraphs, and it was just a big modeled mess. And so I had spent weeks correcting it and making sure everything was right. But with starting out writing, I definitely would work on a very loose structure and go with that. But for me personally, it did not help to write out all of the, so I did character interviews with each of my characters, and to me that was too entailed. That was too much work. The characters really came to me, and their characteristics came to me. I didn't need to waste the time on doing the character interviews, and that would be a good step. It really depends on the person and how much they plan, how much they research. I personally just went by the seat of my pants with a very loose structure.
Wow, that's sounds like too much work. I just find that. So when you say character interviews, what exactly do you mean?
Well, I downloaded a character interview from the internet, and it basically asked questions like, it started out with what their zodiac sign was and what their interests are, hair color, height, weight, and a lot of the information that you would probably find from, say, a Grindr or a dating site. To me, it was a little intrusive for the characters. I wanted to go into detail about personalities and really explore each person, each character, and really bring out their good qualities without pointing them out. So the character interviews would just ask so many different questions, more of the corporate games that you would play. They would ask you, what is the best sandwich you've had? And you would have it in, how many would you take to a deserted island? Stuff like that. And it helped me a little bit, but it wasn't what got me to writing the story. And actually, the character interviews only led me to a point. I took some advice and I just really ran with it. Somebody said, when you're experiencing writer's block, just write. Don't stop, just write. And so one day I was sitting at my table. I felt horrible, and I couldn't figure out what to write, where to take the characters, what to do with them next. And so I decided to write, and to make the most boring situation exciting. And it was interesting, the process, because it was a simple situation. I had gotten up in the middle of the night to get a drink of water, and I was leaning up against the counter, and all of a sudden I saw a light coming up the stairs. And just as I looked back, the light had illuminated someone, and then they disappeared. Well, it was my teenage daughter who was sneaking up to her room. But I was able to write and get it to a point where it was exciting, and that really got me motivated to start back on the book and just go with it.
How much time do you write in a day, or what do you think a good day of writing would be?
Well, I would love to just do nothing but writing. I think 8 to 10 hours a day would be great. But I've got so many things going on at all times. I told myself that I was going to start scheduling my tasks and duties. I would spend 3 days writing, and I would do, the rest, the websites and marketing, all the rest of the days. But that doesn't work. So I would say I spend maybe 5-6 hours a day writing.
Yeah, and it's tough because you can't just turn it on when you want to write, when you're feeling inspired, or can you? Does it just, you can just sit down and say, I'm going to write today at 9 to 12 today? That's it, or do you have to do something else?
Well, no, it doesn't work for me that way either. I am a procrastinator just by nature, and if something else happens, I go with it. So, but I set a goal, and usually that's what helps me out.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean, because some weeks I can have a great week and it's turned on and everything's going well, and then the next week I'm at Starbucks.
So Al, you don't sit down and write a certain amount of
No.
you don't have like an hour that you sit down and write every day or something?
No, and it's either all or nothing. When I turn it on, for instance, like 2 weeks ago, I started on the Sunday. I felt like writing. I wrote till the Saturday, and I got 23,000 words written in 6 days.
Goodness.
And then I'll go 2 weeks and
Wow.
write nothing. Or write 50 words. I think that's because I'm autistic, and I think there's something in my brain that if you trigger me to go on something, I can go on it. And once it works, if it's working, it's detail, and I can just rip with it. And that's not just with writing. I find that's with cleaning or with anything. But when I'm out of sorts, it's not going to happen. It's weird. I'm a weirdo.
No, that's not. I think that's so interesting. And Alan, you said you make goals for yourself. What kind of goals do you set for yourself?
What I do, basically, I started out with the book. I think my main goal was to finish something, because I had three different books already started, and in the series I already have four of the books started, but I needed to finish something, and that was my main goal, is just finish the book. Mm-hmm. So that's one goal, finish the book, and then promote the book, and just, I do have lists of tasks that I need to do on a daily basis. That helps me stay on track and keep going throughout the day, but something that I could check off and feel like I've accomplished something throughout the day, it really helps to get me going the next day.
Well, that's interesting. So what do you do for research for your book? Like, how do you find information out about, let's say, different times or locations or whatever you're doing in your book?
Well, with the time and location, I structured the series out of Denver, Colorado. That is where I've grown up, and I was born and raised in Denver, so I pretty much know everything about it. So I didn't have to do a lot of research about that. And I have some good friends that are police officers, investigators, so that helped me. But the research that I had to do really was on drugs. Now, while I have some people in my life that have been addicted to drugs, it really was eye-opening when I started to do the research, and the drug use and the types of drugs, that alone was just flooring for me, because you don't expect so much detail to be out there on the internet. I mean, it was available to me, and I was just looking for the information. But if somebody was using that as, for other reasons, it could be disturbing. But for me, I just used the internet to research the drugs and sometimes the procedures. And as for the locations, I did have to figure out where the police station was located. I've never been there, so it was interesting.
Were there other interesting things that you came across that you had to research that you didn't have you would never even considered looking up before?
Well, besides the drugs, not really.
Not really.
Yeah, the mother of Noah is she fell and broke her hip. So I realized that while she can possibly move and take care of herself, putting her into an assisted living was kind of harsh. I did have to move my own mother to assisted living. So I have a good foundation to start with that. But right. When I was looking further into it, I was not aware that there was assisted living on an interim basis. So it's not something that is longer than a year, and I didn't know that existed.
So when you write, and you've done your book, and you're going to be doing other books, do you have kind of something you want to get across to people that read it, other than the story itself? Is there an underlying message?
The biggest message that I want to have the readers take away is that as a human race, we're all different. And just because one person has different abilities than the other, it doesn't discount them, and that's the main message. Each person has their own qualities. The main character, Oliver, has a learning disability, OCD, and he is a hoarder, an organized hoarder, but a hoarder. So it's automatically, when you hear learning disability, it has a negative connotation. So a lot of people think about, learning disabilities, but I look at it as a different ability. The character has to figure out a different way to process, and it takes him a little longer, but that also helps him solve problems, and it helps him solve crimes. So I think the main thing is just to take each person and their abilities and their qualities and don't necessarily count them out because they have a diagnosis.
Yeah, that's good advice. Who's your favorite writer? Or do you have one, or do you favorite type of book you like to read?
I actually do, and he's right there with you.
Oh my
Gregory
God.
S.
Wow.
Oh, wow, there you go.
Thank you. That is really generous.
Take a bow.
Yeah, that is really generous.
He'll sign your chest for you.
Alan, I do have a question for you about your personal ties to the book. Like, you talked about the trauma behind it, but I know like you in your life, in your personal life, you've made some pretty remarkable efforts to help other people, help the people around you. Did you translate any of the positive things of those efforts you've made to your characters or to the story? Did you have them take similar actions? Like, I'm thinking about the relationships you've built with people around you.
Absolutely. I try, and so personally, I believe that we need to help each other, and as a human race or writers or whatever, we need to help each other, and that's what's missing in the world. So with my character, Oliver, he is the natural caretaker, and as I sit back and I watch my husband, he is the person who is the caretaker. He is right there helping even when he's not asked. So that helps me. But also, when you're able to help someone and they benefit from it, it helps you also. So definitely give everything you can to helping other people, because it will come back to you someday.
Wow.
So now, has the world in this last year affected you at all? Like, do you find yourself off your normal patterns in writing and the way you think, and even the way you write? Like with the pandemic and all the rioting and picketing and protesting and dumb Donald and all that sort of stuff. But does it have like a stress and therefore it affects you, or what's it done for you?
I was actually thinking about this just this morning, and I am somewhat of an introvert, and the pandemic has helped me because with so much going on in the world, I was able to shut it off and just focus on the inside. And that helped me to finish the book, to start writing the other books. It really did help. But when the news is on and, I make a comment on one post on Facebook that is political, you get 25 others. So that to me is very stressful. I try and channel that stress into the characters, and I really work to get them to a point where they process that challenge and overcome it. So it helps me in the long run, even though, as a person, watching all of the things that are happening in 2020, it's discouraging. So I have to work hard to stay positive and optimistic.
Yeah. So it's that time. So what's your website?
I actually have several. The one that is my main website is alanwild.us, and that really is where I do interviews with other authors, and I have a book on my website. And in a former life, I was a photographer. I still have all of my equipment, and I am still open to being a photographer. It just doesn't happen. So I have some of my work on that page as well. But I also have hope-and-despair.website, and that's a site devoted strictly to my book. And I will be doing blog posts, which are actually stories of the characters. So that will be just odd posts every now and then.
Fantastic. We'll have that up on our website as well, and we're going to have your book up there. So if people are listening, they can do one click and find you. And that'll be great. Hey, so you're going to keep on taking pictures then and doing photography? It says portrait studio photography. So you really like that?
I do. It's great to work with people. You meet some really unusual people along the way, and it helps me to, just experience and get out there and express my creativity. I like doing on-location shoots, but I really enjoy the studio work, but I don't have a studio. So I set up wherever it's necessary. I've shot in some really bizarre locations. That helped to really expand my creativity. I mean, for example, I was called to a house, and once I got there, I really should have just said, no, can't do it, bye.
Oh.
But this house was so small, and they had furniture crammed in it. There was literally no space for me to set up. So I had to be creative, and I put one of the stands on the sofa, the other stand on a chair, and just went with it. I mean, it worked. The guy loved the pictures. There was more touching up that I had to do, but it was a challenge.
Wow. And I bet you get inspired by that too, because you said you can see people or see situations or listen to people and get really an imagination going over that. So maybe the photography helps you as well.
It does, definitely. I learn so much from the individuals I photograph just by small talk. And there was an individual that I worked with, and he came back at least 6 times. And he enjoyed working with me. I enjoyed working with him. And through talking with him, this guy had thrown so much money into his education, and he had like 6 degrees. And I couldn't figure out why he wanted to stay being a model / stripper. And it was gratifying for him to be able to do that. But he could be a doctor, a therapist, whatever he chose to be. But just listening to his story, figuring out where he wanted to go, I mean, that to me was priceless. It was definitely a good situation for me to draw from.
Wow. Yeah, I guess that's true. You never know who you're going to meet, and when you find out the story, it can be eye-opening.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, this has been a great little conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. The book we're talking about is Hope and Despair. Our guest has been the author, Alan Wild. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
To find out more about our show, guests, or to listen to past shows from our archive, please go to www.houseofmysteryradio.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.